Burning on. Thank you. Sorry. I'll use my Monday excuse, I guess. Okay. All right. So again, the two important things here are, one, the information we want to keep, and two, how we want to organize that information. And in order to identify those things properly, these are the kinds of questions we need to start asking ourselves. Who will be accessing the information and what are their needs? So that means both staff, potential volunteers, agencies who are posting volunteer opportunities, any of the potential consumers of the information that you can identify, and what are each of their individual needs, because they're going to vary from one group to another. Specifically, what types of information do we need for referral purposes in order to refer someone to an opportunity, versus what type of information does staff need just for the data management process. So how do I know that I'm keeping this information up to date, whatever information I need about historical changes I'm going to have to make in the future, what do I need to store in order to effectively manage the record? And I mentioned historical, but what kinds of historical information do we need to understand changes to the record over time? In a previous session, I was demonstrating something and showed the history feature, which is available in just the community information software right now, which shows all the past changes that have been made to a record. So you can go to any field and see every change that has been made to that field, exactly the changes that were made, the date they were made, and the person who made those changes. So that's one kind of historical information, but there are others. It basically means, how do I understand how this record needs have changed over time? That might be internal memos telling me when I've done specific things to the record, or other kinds of information like that. Next question is, what searches do we want to be able to perform? An example of why this is important, if all I have is a big blob of text where everything is just free form as though I'm writing a paragraph, the ways that I can search that information are quite limited. I can really only do keyword type searches. I wouldn't be able to do the other types of searches like what we do with checklist searches. I wouldn't be able to do age searching, for example, if the ages weren't in their own separate fields that we can analyze them independently. So we have to understand how people will be trying to retrieve the information, because that can influence how we store it. And finally, what kinds of statistics do we want to be able to gather? Because if you want to know something about the kinds of information information that's being posted, for instance, if you wanted to be able to do some kind of a profile of the ages, the age ranges of the opportunities that are being posted, or what percentage of the opportunities being posted require police check, what percentage require transportation, or that you have your own vehicle, just for knowledge for you, in order to have a sense of what kinds of things are being required of volunteers, how hard it is to find a particular kind of position, say one that's on a bus route. If only 10% of your postings say they're on a bus route, that potentially creates an issue for people who do not have a car, for example. So if you understand what information you want to be able to get out of your data, not just to find the records, but from a statistical point of view, to be able to analyze your information, that also influences how we keep the data. Because if it isn't structured in a way that we can accumulate those statistics, we just won't be able to do that reporting for you. Any questions on those questions? I'm sure there are others, but these are very fundamental. If you don't know how to answer all of these questions, you won't be able to put together an effective data model. So these are all critical information. And then there are other things that we can ask ourselves as well, but we need to know these questions. We really should know it about every kind of information that we keep. Okay, the volunteer software is currently at a disadvantage just because there's no official standards group that gets involved on behalf of all of you to make decisions about what your data model is going to look like. So there's nothing saying you must have a field that keeps this information, it has to be kept in this particular way, these are the values we expect you to have, and so on. There's a question. Sharon's asking, is there a list of what the different levels of user have access to? That's up to you, Sharon. So you have total control over who accesses what kinds of information in your database. It's going to be different for every database user because you set the security up on each of the fields in your database. We don't set that up for you. So there's no, there really is no standard on that either. It's whatever you have configured in your view to allow this user or that user to be able to work with. That's what it determines. Sharon's asking what came with your initial setup. We usually make a judgment call based on common uses when we set up a brand new database. So we know which fields are commonly used by the public and which fields are commonly used by staff. Can I get that list? It's not a list. I literally go in and check them off every time. But I could put that together of what I would commonly pick out for volunteer versus the public. Certainly, I can do that. But I don't have an official list. That's something I just know, and I would do it at the time that I do the setup. So. Where could you go to get it? Basically, looking at what other people are posting is about all you can say about what's public versus not and what fields people are using. There again, there's no standard. Everybody's done their own thing, so we really have no standards. That's a fundamental challenge with the volunteer software. Is there is no standard. There's no standard fields to use, no standard way to use them. So even for the same field, we have two members using the same field, but not in the same way. They're not keeping the same information in it. So that really presents us with a challenge because we don't have a good understanding of the different ways people are using our fields, and certainly no official recommendations to give to people about how they should use it, especially to a new member who could really benefit from the guidance of official, this is the fields exactly what Sharon's asking, these are the fields we recommend you give to the public, these are the fields we recommend you give to staff, and this is what we recommend you keep in them. We just simply don't have that. And CIOC isn't a standards group, so although we kind of fill the void sometimes, the reality is that that's not really CIOC's mandate to do that. So it's definitely a challenge. Okay. Further to that, basically what's happened is that because we don't have a standards group, CIOC users have to come up with their own standards that promote consistency and leverage best practices. So it's really up to the members themselves or maybe working in cooperation with the OVCN or other groups that you do have to try and come up with some standards that promote consistency from one group to another and make use of the best practices that can be identified, not just within CIOC members, but outside. So that means we have to look at what are our members doing now and what information are they keeping, because that will help us determine what kind of best practices are out there. And what are the deficiencies? What are we not doing? But we also need to look at what other centers are doing. So non-CIOC members, what are they doing that we are not doing? So there are plenty, I'm sure, of best practices out there that we don't take advantage of. So we can't just focus internally on CIOC members and what CIOC members do. It really should be for a broader review of what are volunteer centers in general in Canada or elsewhere even doing that is a good idea that CIOC should also make use of. CIOC members should also make use of. So the challenge is without an organization to step up and do that research and come up with those best practices, it's a challenge because it's not officially in CIOC's mandate, but at the same time, you know, we are a group that's formed, and we have an opportunity to leverage the membership base to talk to each other and use that to come up with some best practices. So whether that goes back to the volunteer users group, or whether that goes even up to the OVCN to try and come up with some standards or best practices, not even necessarily standards, but saying, here are some really good ideas about what you should keep, the way you should keep it, the way you should format your information to be consistent, to be to give high value to your clients, and so on. So it's not like we can come up with a technical solution for that until we have the backbone of, as I say, not necessarily standards, but at least best practices to back that up. And even as we look at trying to have some kind of a basis in best practices or standards, or at least some common understanding of how we use information, we have to respect that not everybody does things the same way. CIOC doesn't expect people to do those things the same way, so there still has to be flexibility for people to keep information that they want, the way that they want to keep it. And we can't expect that everybody is going to use exactly the same fields and only those fields because it's not realistic. It doesn't meet the differing needs of the different members and the different needs of the communities that those members serve. So it's just not realistic to enforce in any way that everybody has to use the same fields in exactly the same way, even though we do want to encourage best practices and standards even if we could. So any question about that kind of stuff, standards, etc.? Okay.
Maybe just a comment, Kate, that
sure.
I understand Sharon's feeling around that, especially being a new volunteer center. Because of my learning with the information and referral side of things, I did take it upon myself to create, as you say, Kate, sort of a standard or best practices kind of document for our office, and I think that's good work to pursue, and perhaps the next time we meet as the volunteer module users group at the end of March, that I think that this group is starting a slow exploration towards whether we want to come up with some best practices documents and that sort of thing. So certainly I welcome this group to get together on that and explore how far they want to go with something of that nature. It's a good idea.
Okay. So I'll start with a really brief list of the things that we are aware of in terms of data model or data structure changes. But the first is, are we keeping the right information now? Is it currently meeting the needs of clients and staff? Is it organized effectively for searching statistics, data entry, etc.? And do we have fields that nobody's using? So these are fundamental questions that we actually don't know the answers to, which is not a good thing. And that's the reason for a session like this, is to get a sense from you of how is our current data model or data structure working for you now? Because we simply don't know. We don't get enough feedback to really especially on the volunteer side, to really understand what is and isn't working and if we're keeping the right information. So in terms of what's already been suggested by our membership, I have a very short list. The first is the creation of a screening checklist. For those who don't understand this feature, it's been around, this feature request has been around for a long time. So many of you may have heard this spiel before. The idea of the screening checklist is really to replace what we now have as a police check field, to expand. I guess there was some, I don't know if it came from the OVCN or where it came from, but there was some kind of best practices document around screening practices for agencies posting, or agencies who have volunteers, encouraging them to use specific steps to screen their potential volunteers and their volunteers. And the idea here would be to take that list or something similar of certain best practices of screening volunteers and have a checklist. And the reason for this would be twofold. One is it allows the potential volunteer to have a better sense of the kind of screening that that organization is going to do. And two, that it really encourages posting agencies to look at this list at the time that they're posting their opportunity and saying, you know, we really should be doing X, Y, Z. By always seeing that list of best practices, that it would really bring to the forefront that they should be considering doing these types of screenings of their volunteers. So it was intended to serve both the posting agency and the volunteer at the same time. That's the idea of the screening checklist. So it would include a police check, but it would also include whatever else had been on this, I guess, official best practices list that had come forward at the time. This was years ago, so I'm afraid I don't know. It's stated in my memory the details of where this came from, but I know some of the members who had brought it up at the time. So I'm sure it's something we could recreate if this was still a desired feature.
I might take this back to our membership services coordinator, Kate, because she's done a ton of work on police checks and screening best practices with our membership. So I'll maybe, would it be helpful if if there was some documentation that she's produced to send it to you, or what would be the best way to make that connection?
Well, so I would say that's something to share with the members. It's not if we create something like this screening checklist, the actual details of what's on it don't matter from a technical point of view, other than we'd like to give people something to start from.
Okay.
But because that will all be configurable in the software, it's not something we need to know in order to implement it from a technical point of view. But it is something that other volunteer centers are going to want to have in order to create their list and in order to do something effective with it. So certainly I think it's information worth sharing. It's not something that is any kind of technical block to us implementing the feature that we're talking about, because we don't really need to know what the list is, only that people want a list. And then in the same way you can configure any other checklist in CIOC, people would be able to configure it. Now when we introduce a new checklist like this, we like to start people out with some value. So at that point, we would want to have some kind of introductory list that we would distribute to our members. And from there, they could change their list. But having standard values, obviously, is a high benefit, and it gives people something to start from. So it would only be at that point that we would actually, want to have some kind of list that we share with others. But I think the materials you're talking with would definitely be beneficial to share with others, and certainly it comes up in the discussion about whether this is valuable and whether this is a change we should add.
And how are you feeling like the sharing of best practices would come out in the technical tool? Or like a pop-up screen or a question mark, or how would that be shared, do you think?
I'm not sure what you mean. But oh, okay. So the idea here is that what we mean by this is when that person fills out their form, that posting agency fills out their form, there's a couple of things that could happen. One is just by seeing the list, and obviously there's a little field help that you can add that can give them more information about screening, right? There's a little question mark beside the field if you fill it out, that you could then provide information about screening best practices. But even more than that, we could build in the ability to have a link at the top that says, click here for more information or for best practices on volunteer screening or whatever, where you could provide a link to a page on your website, or even if we do come up with some kind of standard spiel, I guess, something that can be posted for everyone to reference, where they could get some more information about that kind of thing. But I mean, that's sort of a to be determined thing, where we'd sort of have to consult at the time that we implement it about the specific details of how that could work. But to begin with, you would at minimum have that little field help question mark where they could click to get more information. And even just seeing the list of items of the things that they could be doing would hopefully encourage people to find out more about what those steps are.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I've got another question. Sharon is saying there could be a general information sheet that OVCN creates and everyone can link to from the OVCN website. The OVCN is meeting this Friday, so she can suggest this idea to them. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, for those that use the community information software, you may be aware that in the community information software you can now create on-demand extra fields. So if you find a need for a field that doesn't exist in the software, you can just make a new one. There are 2 extra fields in the volunteer software, which are plain text fields, but that's it. The system on the community information side allows you to create radio button fields, where you could pick yes or no, or known or, you know, or required or not required, or things like that. It also allows you to create date fields, plain text fields, website fields, email address fields, and sometime later in the year you'd be able to create on-demand extra drop-down fields and eventually extra checklist fields as well, so that for anything that the software didn't do for you, something that wasn't a standard field that everybody used the same way, you would have the opportunity to create your own. And that means if you're running a special project where you need to capture some special information just for that, you wouldn't have to figure out how to cram it into the existing data model. You could just create a new field for that purpose. And then, frankly, if it was no longer needed after that project was over, you could get rid of that field and never use it again. That's the advantage of being able to do these sorts of things on demand. The nice part about it especially is that you don't have to have a software enhancement if you want a new field. You want a new field, you just create it. You don't pay for anything, you don't wait for it, you have it the moment that you want it. This is actually a huge change in the community information software. The most commonly requested change used to be, can I have a new field? And somebody used to always have to wait for it and pay for it, and now they can just make one. There's no more, can I have a new field, really, unless it's something very complicated. And Sharon says, yes, yes, yes. So that's something I really expect is coming. I would be very surprised if that didn't get implemented. It doesn't. We've done so much work on the community information side to make this possible. It will be almost no work, really, to add it on the volunteer side as well, since we've already done so much of the work in the design and the structure on the community information side. It becomes almost a freebie on the volunteer side. Okay, we have a field currently called clients, which is just a paragraph, what we call a free text field, where you can type in anything you want. And we've had a few requests to make this a checklist field. So that you would still have the notes field where you can type anything you want, but there would be some predefined checklists representing specific types of client groups, both to make data entry easier so that you don't have to type the same thing all the time every time you fill it out, and also it allows you to be more consistent. You always type it in the same way, it always occurs in the same order, and finally it opens up searching possibilities. So people who want to work with a particular kind of client, for instance, someone who really wants to work with young children or people with disabilities or seniors, could use that as part of their search criteria, saying that they want this the organization that they work for to have a particular group as their target client. So it's just another searching tool that we can make available once we make it into a checklist. As long as it's a free text field where everybody can type whatever they want, we really can't effectively search on it, and you can't count on the information to be consistent enough to find it in a keyword search, let's say. And we don't even search the client field, I don't think, as part of our keyword searching. Okay, we've had many requests for the ability to create seasonal records. This is one we come back to a lot, and I'll explain why we keep coming back to it and have never done it. The idea behind a seasonal record is, instead of a display until date where it passes and then it goes away from your searches, the idea would be, yes, you can create a display until date, but you also create a reappear date on which that record comes back into view. The challenge in doing this is generally before that record comes back into view, it should probably be updated. Likely, even if that particular event or that particular opportunity appears year after year after year, let's say a summer camp counselor position happens every single year, even if that's true, the application dates are going to change, and other things are going to change. So just having it pop up again is generally not a good idea. And so it's tricky because we understand the need and the desire for this, but at the same time, it's better done with an update schedule. And so if we do this, we have to figure out how can we ensure that that record gets updated before the public sees it. Because even if it comes back into the staff view, when they can see it and see that it needs to be updated, it's still, you wouldn't want it to show up in the public view. So it's certainly something that we can look into further, but it has to be done thoughtfully. The results otherwise would be poor. So that's all we have, really, in terms of existing structural requests that have been documented. So I'm going to open things up right now to general chat, discussion, etc. And you're all unmuted. And really, it's whatever you would like to say. I'm not sure if this is the sort of thing that everyone can take back and think about, or if you have ideas now, just let me know.
I guess my thought, Kate, is when you talk about seasonal schedule, I tend to agree with you in that I certainly wouldn't want any record just sort of popping back up into public view, and you're absolutely right. Even for recurring camp counselor positions, things change always, the contact person or the schedule, application deadline, whatever. But what it reminded me of is, and forgive me if this is possible and I just have forgotten how to do it, but oh, we have somebody talking in the background, I think.
Yeah, Sarah's phone, I think.
Oh,
Sarah?
okay.
Sure, I'll mute Sarah for now.
Yeah, because I could hear community connection here. I'm at home, that's why I could tell.
Okay, well,
But
Sarah, you're temporarily muted.
But I think that for me, one of the things that we like to do is things like summer volunteering or event volunteering, that kind of thing. When it would be really great to be able to take a seasonal kind of thing like that and create a dynamic search that can be accessed by the public, that they can you can click on summer volunteering or event volunteering or volunteering over Christmas or whatever you want to create, and have some kind of preset list of opportunities with a particular field, whatever it is we decide to choose. Pull up that list. I don't know whether it used to be possible, I think, and then I think I ran into trouble trying to get it to do it again. I don't know.
I think the only way that's ever been possible is that you create an area of interest of that, and then you can actually bookmark a search for that area of interest. But other than that, we haven't ever had anything specifically like that. It all comes back to things we've discussed in our searching session, let's say, where we talked about doing featured opportunities and things like that. I think that really ties back to what you're talking about now, the ability to bring up certain things either by calendar or, as we say, featuring a particular opportunity or group of opportunities, a way to highlight them outside of the rest of the group. And in a way, that's a data structure change, because it does involve classifying the opportunities in some way. So certainly, everything crosses over in the software.
Yeah.
That's independent, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's part of what we need to understand is what kind of searching do you want to do? What kind of special lists might you like to create? If we go into something like an events calendar where you can list all your one-time events, or potentially you can list it's not a one-time event, but a seasonal event where you could show that it occurred across a particular period of time. I mean, yes, absolutely, we can do that. It's just for some of it, we'll have the information, because if you have a start date and a display until, we can use that as the range of when that goes. Or, you know, and I think there's even an end date as well. So we can use that. That doesn't necessarily mean data structure changes, other than, you know, if you want to be able to group some records by a particular, in a particular way that's different from your areas of interest. And then you can create some kind of a checklist where it's almost like what you do on the community information side, where you add a publication code where you say, you know, I'm going to group these together. That's come up lots of times, that would be something that people would want to do, is basically group records together to say they have something in common, whatever that might be. And there's certainly no one way. There's a million reasons why you might want to group records together. So you have to have something generic, like a publication code, where you're just saying, you know, for whatever random reason, I'm grouping these records together under a particular category.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, that's definitely something to look into. And I think we've discussed it lots of time. That was actually something that was considered in the original Volunteer Hamilton grant work that I did for them. I know that was on the potential list, that when I sat down with them and came up with the enhancements that they were going to potentially do, that was one that was in my list that I gave them. So we've looked into it as far back as, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess now.
Okay, can I add to that? I'm almost thinking it's almost what the CIC side does, where they're creating views for their different postings.
Well, you can do now. So you can actually cluster groups of records for a view now. That's easy. I think this goes beyond that, because the tricky thing about that is if you've only got 10 opportunities, you don't want to create a whole new view for that, right? That's the difference. Right. I think what you want is the ability to create nice, distinct little lists in your own view, but just for special purposes. Because certainly anyone who wants to create a special view now can do so. It's in your community setup. For anyone who's dared to go in that, it's a little bit complicated. You can actually create lists of records and have a view with just specific records in it. That is a feature you already have. This goes beyond that to, within my existing view, right from my main public site, I want to have a special list of Christmas opportunities, or a special list of, you know, I have a special event coming to my community. I know everyone is going to be looking for things related to that event. I want to be able to direct them easily to all of the opportunities associated with that event, right?
Yes.
Things like that.
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah, that would be good, because again, my brain's going in a few different areas, especially when you said about we can create views now in the Vol module. I honestly didn't know that, so I'll need to figure out how that's done, because I'm thinking Change the World, the Ontario Youth Volunteer Challenge. The way that we bypassed to be able to post all of our opportunities last year is we created a new database record on the CIC side to link all of our postings to it. Right. So instead, what we could have done is created a view just for the Ontario Youth Volunteer Challenge, use our existing database record for our volunteer center, and had all of our listings under a different view. I didn't know that was available, so that's good to know. Not sure if I'm going to change it this year, because we're already rolling ahead with Change the World, but I'm thinking categories would be really cool, because then that allows us to be able to pull up a specific category, say it's Change the World, say it's Christmas opportunities. Here in Mississauga, we have the Memorial Cup that's happening, so we have like almost 22 volunteer opportunities, and they're coming in like more different types of opportunities, because they need almost 2,000 volunteers over the course of 2 weeks. So I'm sitting here, the categories would be really cool. And I guess the interim solution is that view, I guess, that you're talking about.
Yeah, and if you have it as an area of interest, you can easily, if you have a website or something, you can really easily, or even if you've got a custom header and footer in your database, you can easily create a link directly to a particular area of interest. So if you go to your browse by interest page, any of them that you click on will bring up a new search, and if you copy the link from the browser bar, you can then create a link to that, either from your website or...
Oh, yeah, I do that now. Yeah, I actually do that now. Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, that's an option. It's not a great option. It's just an interim option. But I think in the long run, we need something that's separate from those areas of interest that really represents something generic. As I said, it's not something you can predict ahead of time. It's, you know, it's a special need. It's the same purpose that we have already in the community information side, what we call our quick list, where, you know, I'm going to group all the faith groups together. I'm going to group all the, you know, earlier centers together. It's just arbitrary, not arbitrary, but it's just by need, and that need changes all the time, and it's not something that a predefined classification system like areas of interest is going to do for you. So certainly I'll add that to the list, and it is something that has come up in the past. It wasn't in my list of data, it wasn't tagged data structure, probably how I didn't find it, but it is something that has come up before, and certainly something that we can consider.
Anyone have any other questions or suggestions for Kate regarding data structure?
I think a lot of this is going to have to come back to the group actually going through that the original list here, right? Taking the time to say who accesses our information and what do each one of them need, and am I meeting those needs now? Keep talking to your volunteers and saying, you know, what information wasn't in the opportunity record that you were looking at that would have been really helpful to you in deciding whether that was an appropriate opportunity for you. Right?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess two things come to my mind when I think of the different user groups. So as a data manager, the one thing I always struggle with, because the volunteer opportunities are so changeable, is really getting that snapshot number of how many volunteers are needed on a particular day. I'm always forced to sort of, I actually cheat it, and I go into the public view of the search step 1 and find a snapshot on one day of number of volunteers needed and number of opportunities posted. But for me, I always find that sort of an elusive thing statistically to be able to capture, because it does change so much. I don't know whether anything could be done about that, or whether we could even build in some kind of snapshot tool, like, you know, on the 1st of December, this is how many public opportunities were posted in current, and this is how many volunteers were needed on that day, or something.
Yeah, if you decide that that's a need, if you need to see over time how that changes, then that comes back to the what types of historical information do we need to understand changes to the record over time, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens then is that you build into the history a record of how each of those numbers have changed. And coming back to something related, we discussed in the searching portion of our program that it can be a real challenge to have to put a hard number of positions in,
Yeah.
right, or a hard number of people in. But
Yeah.
sometimes that just doesn't apply.
Well,
And
again, it's more like a snapshot, and that's what I try and communicate when I'm gathering these statistics and reporting on them, to say, as of December 1st, 2010, this is the snapshot. But if you went in 2 days later, the snapshot would be different. It's not a, you know, it's capturing a moment.
Yeah.
I suppose the only other thing that I would think of in terms of if you were asking a public user, are you getting the kinds of searches that you need to get the information you need about opportunities? I mean, I think for our community, I can't think of anything off the top of my head in terms of a element of an opportunity that someone would be missing, because I think we're pretty in-depth. But it's, again, for me, going back to that whole public interface thing that, you know, and I know we've talked about this at other sessions, but for me that would probably be a common comment in our communities to say, well, you know, if you've just got organizations, and you just got the alphabet, you've just got this, I want to be able to do searching on age groups, or I want to search close to my postal code, or I want to do this or that, and how much more we could, not to overwhelm the public, but what else could or should we be doing in that interface to make records more searchable?
Yeah, and certainly there's, I think almost everything you've captured, not everything, but almost everything you've captured are searches we can do now without really making changes. There are some, like for instance, if we want to do by postal code, then we have to start capturing the location information.
We're talking about that.
Right? Because right now on the community information side, you're entering in all the little components of the address separately. Right? It's all broken down so that it's consistently formatted and it's geocoded and all that stuff. And that's what allows us to do search by proximity. Show me what's near my postal code. So we would have to change the way that location field is used in order to do that type of search. And what we would probably do is have a checkbox saying same as organization, and then it would just automatically grab the address from the organization. You wouldn't have to enter it again. And if it was a different location, then you would have what is basically the same as the site address field for the organization, with all the details. What building is it in? What's the street number? What's the street name? You know, all those really fine details that would allow us to do that kind of location-based searching. And similarly, if we decide that searching, having those special category lists that you can create and destroy on demand as required, then we need to add that as a new field, something, some new thing that you're doing during your data entry process.
Yeah.
But a lot of the search improvements that we can make, we won't actually have to change the record very much. So we already know we can search by age. Staff can do it, right?
Yeah.
We have lots. The staff can do an advanced search that the public can't. So in some cases, it's just a matter of, and to cheat, actually, your public can search by age. If you make your own search form, the public can search by age. So there's nothing preventing that. We simply have to add it onto our form.
Cool.
They can in fact do it now from the student search. They just can't do it from the main search. So that all ties back to, you know, I think we've documented all of that stuff in the searching session. Once we get all the, you know, notes together and ensure that we've documented everything, we'll know. And that will imply some changes to our records, certainly. But if most people think that the information you're keeping about the opportunity is pretty much what you need, that's a good thing. That's great. There's the sort of the new ones that I talked about, and you know, do we want certainly extra? I think that's a no-brainer. Giving people the ability to add new things if they need it. Whether does the screening checklist make sense? Again, it wouldn't be mandatory, so people who didn't want to use it wouldn't have to. Same clients. So if people didn't want to have the checklist and just wanted the text box, that's fine. They could do that. But having that checkbox option for people who want to be able to quickly check off, you know, we serve, you know, children, or we serve seniors, or we serve, you know, people with a disability, or whatever it is, that then opens up searching possibilities as well. It makes data entry easier too, because checking off a box is easier than typing it out every time.
Absolutely.
So, and I don't know if there's others. Again, it's, until I get feedback, it's hard for me to say. And if you think of statistics that you have to gather now that you can't gather effectively or at all, that you would really love to have, we need someone to ask. Until someone asks and says, can I get this kind of statistic, we won't know to be able to put things in place to make that possible. So our issue at the moment is we just don't know what the needs are. And I don't think.
Can I ask a question? Maybe we should post this on the discussion board for the VOL module users, just to get their feedback.
Which question in particular?
Just even just some of the information that, like on the slide that Kate's looking at right now, that has all of those questions for us to consider. I'm wondering if that should be something we put out to all the VOL users to consider this information, and now's the time to kind of see if there's any additional, you know, data structure revisions that are required. Because we have only a few of us on the call today. There's so many more VOL users that might have some information that they could share with us. Just a thought.
Plus, you do need to think about it a bit too, I think, you know.
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking if we put it up on the discussion board for everyone to think about, and maybe like give a couple weeks timeline for people to you know, get back their feedback, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to do that? I will take sort of verbatim what's on that slide with those key questions, and just say that this is something that we discussed in our webinar today. We'd love to get more feedback on data structure. We'd love people to give it some thought around, you know, what else they'd like these records to do for them that they don't do already, to really think about what their needs are from these various perspectives. Yeah, I could do that. Okay.
Not to give you more work to do, Liz, sorry.
All right. Okay, I can do that. Any other questions or comments or feedback at all around this process? We're at 14, Kate, so that means we're more than halfway, I think.
Yeah.
I know you've got 21, I think, posted. And
yeah, and then there's sort of 2 sessions that have to be run after that I won't be running.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's about 23 total. So we're more than halfway.
Yay!
The scarier part is there's only 1 month left and then I'm gone.
Yes, that is scary. You're absolutely right. Oh, boy.
Just don't do any heavy lifting or exercise, Kate. Just go nice.
Oh, I've had to do tons of heavy lifting. My daughter moved into a new room and let me tell you, trying to assemble furniture with a big belly in the way is almost impossible.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Anyhow, so I really think this is something everyone's going to have to kind of take and chew on and think about, and you know, talk to both the people you're working with, and if you can, talk to the posting agencies, the volunteers, find out if they have things that they're just not telling you, because sometimes no one will let you know if you don't ask.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll add that. I'll add that to the message that this is something that not only should organizations be considering within their organization, but asking potential volunteers, asking their member agencies, posting agencies, if they, you know, what else they see that would need to be done. I love the idea about the screening thing. I think that's just great. We've done so much work in Guelph on that, and creating the extra awareness from the agency level I think is brilliant, because we've been working really hard at that over the last few months.
Yeah, and it's, you know, so we'll have to see what we can gather. Hopefully this can go to the users group, and as I say, some of this really belongs in a bigger arena than just what CIOC's doing. So that both means, you know, are there other people doing this job out there that are doing things that are smart that we can make use of? Are they keeping information that we don't keep? That's a smart idea. Are they searching it in a way that we're not? That's a smart idea, because we should be leveraging that. And so, and really, if you can standardize, if you can share best practices at a bigger level than just what our CIOC members are doing, that should happen.
Well, and I think the other thing that I've been keeping my eye on is the new portal that has been put out called getvolunteering.ca, and it's been co-sponsored by TB Ontario and Manulife and an organization called Q Media from Ottawa and Volunteer Canada. And it doesn't go deeper. It doesn't go deeper with the types of information that it has. So I think in terms of a data structure, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an organization that goes as deep as CIOC with the kinds of things that we collect information on, but it acts differently. It's more like social media and volunteer opportunities come together. So I don't know whether people, you know, members of the public would have other things to say in terms of, well, we'd like to be, because this particular tool incorporates that sort of social media element and allows people also to post what they're interested in, to make, I think, what they call a volunteer offer. So there's sort of a lot more sort of flow between potential volunteers and organizations looking for volunteers, and there's more of that kind of conversation happening. So I'm kind of keeping my eyes on that too, trying to think you know, what else are they doing or that they're sharing that that we could perhaps think about bringing an element of that into what we do. But I still think, I mean, we go quite deep with the volunteer opportunities when I think anything I've seen in the past from other organizations, you know, you get a general description and you get some contact info and you're good to go. You know, I think in terms of depth, I still think, I would suspect that CIOC is still pretty pretty high on that end in terms of our depth of information.
Right. So a lot of the change, and really, I would agree with you, Liz. I think a lot of the changes are going to be around making changes we need in order to make our searching and matching more effective than what it is now.
I would agree.
And statistics, as I say, because statistics can give incredibly useful information to many different people. Like knowing that, I even find looking at the volunteer profiles and knowing how many people want to volunteer for a particular type of task or in a particular community, and seeing, you know, basically no one wants to volunteer in this particular neighborhood, you know, so what can we do about that? Things like that can be very, very useful statistics. So I'm big on that. I guess it's sort of the social planning spin of it, that you can get some very, very good information out of your system, and it would be good to identify what those things might be and how we can organize our information to get that out.
Great. Yeah, I like that approach. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, well, I will post this information on the discussion board, kind of expanding on what we've sort of been talking about here, and trying to get some more feedback from people in terms of their needs around data structure, or thereupon expanded needs in searching and stats reporting. And I thank you all for coming and joining us today and keeping the conversation going. I know all of you have been on many sessions before, and I appreciate you coming and getting this stuff really into your head to think about how you can contribute to the development and what cool things will be coming with the CIOC v3.
All right, thanks everyone.
Great, thanks everyone.